there, today I bring you my wrap up of the Dewey's 24-hour readathon. This was my first time participating and it was great fun and I would definitely be doing it again. It was so nice to just be able to dedicate that pure amount of time to reading. It actually reminded me when I was a kid and I used to get home on Friday and literally just spend the weekend reading books. And it was really nice and really refreshing and just lovely, and I miss it already. I would definitely be, as I say, be participating again, and anyone who hasn't done it, I would definitely say give it a go. It was such good fun. I'm not going to do a in-depth review of the books I read. I read my TBR plus one, so I surpassed my expectations quite drastically, actually. I really didn't think I would get through my TBR. I did go to sleep in the middle, so I only read for about 16 hours of it. But I had to sleep, you know, it's important. So I'm going to just do a brief review of each of these and then talk about them in more depth again in my wrap-up, of which I think I'm going to have to do two, because I have read so many books this month. I started with the perfect book, which is the BFG by Roald Dahl. This is so much fun. I'm going to put it down because it's making the screen go red. But it's so much fun. I'm sure I read this when I was a kid. I can't really remember. I can remember watching the film a lot. And reading it, I'm sure I've read it before. But I absolutely loved it. It was hilarious. It was one of those kids' books, even though written for kids, there are things in there for adults as well, which I loved. And the thing that I really loved was the way the BFG talked. But the BFG has a very unique way of speaking. He gets his sort of statements a bit messed up. His sort of sayings and things are a bit wrong. And you sort of have to decipher what he's saying. But he's so much fun. And he calls human beings human beings. And Sophie's an orphan. And he says, "Oh, you are a norphan." And things like that. And it just, I was laughing out loud. I loved it. Oh, amazing. Best way to start the read off, I think. It was so much fun. Then I read not such a good book, The Journey to the East by Herman Hesse. I've read this before. I couldn't really remember much about it. Reading it again, it's just a bit of a non-book, really. It doesn't have much story. It's very thin. It only took me about an hour to read, but it doesn't have any story. It's basically the story of a book that was going to be written but wasn't, about a journey that we don't actually find anything about. There is a nice scene in here where he's talking to a painter, and the painter is saying about how an artist is like half the person their creation is, because the creation is ultimately their sacrifice, like how a mother becomes half a person when she has a child. I like that bit, and I did remember that bit from it, but the rest is just, I could have done without it. Didn't love it. Then I read The Bad Beginning in the series of Unfortunate Events #1 by Lemony Snicket. It's a shame that I read this just after reading the BFG, because I think the BFG was one of those kids' stories that had stuff in it for adults, whereas this, because it's written for a slightly older audience who would be reading it for themselves, I think it doesn't have those things in there for adults, because obviously the BFG is written for an audience that are probably going to be having the book read to them, so they're going to put things in there for adults, for the adult who was reading it. But with this, I didn't find that. That said, it was okay. I will carry on with the series. I've got them all. I wouldn't go crazy for it. I have heard, though, that this is one of those things that if you read it as a child, you will love it, but it doesn't necessarily translate into adulthood. I found it a bit far-fetched and silly, and also it was all a bit beyond belief for me, but it was okay. Then I read The Library of Unrequited Love by Sophie Dewey. Funnily enough, there was a lot of references in this to the Dewey Decimal System, and I thought that was quite appropriate for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon. This is an average book. It's very thin. It's basically just a account of a librarian who has found somebody in the library. They've been sleeping in there overnight, and she's sort of giving them her life story, basically, as she prepares the library for the day. It's written in second person, so it's all the librarian talking to the person like, you do this and you think this, and it's all like a monologue basically from the librarian. I find second person quite problematic, especially in longer pieces. I enjoy it in a short story, I enjoy writing it in a short story, but for a long piece I don't think it works, because it is such a narrow view. You literally only get one side of the conversation, and it can be quite clumsy because the person who is speaking almost has to fill in for the other person. I don't know, it's not my favourite. This was okay. It's basically just her ranting and raving about the people that come into the library. She's got one person who she is kind of in love with. I wouldn't rave about it again, but it was an enjoyable read, and it was library. I like library, so. Then my absolute favourite read of the readathon, A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I don't know why it took me so long to pick this up. I've had it on my shelf for a while, and I actually tried starting to read the first chapter and I just couldn't get into it. But I think when I was trying to read it, I was also trying to watch a programme on telly and it was just too much going on. So dedicating the time purely to reading this was fantastic. It's amazing. It's all the things. It's basically looking at the struggle of women in fiction, and it's strange that this was given, I think, in 1928. It's basically a speech she gave at a college, put into a book, and it was given in 1928, and she's looking back at 1828 and thinking about how it was for them then, and saying that actually not much has changed. And obviously looking at it now in 2016, you can still see that not much has changed. Like, obviously it's easier for women now, but there are still those obstacles. Very interesting. I could go on about this for hours, but I will talk about it more in my main wrap-up. Then I read Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. This is just a short story by Hemingway. It's about 100 pages long, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. But this is my first fiction by Ernest Hemingway. I'm going to put it down because, again, it's making me go red. This is my first fiction by Ernest Hemingway. I've read A Movable Feast by him before. I've avoided his fiction purely because I know that he was into bullfighting and things, and that really is not my bag. Don't like it. So I've avoided him. But I had got a few of his books, and I wanted to read him. Now, I would say about this, the writing was solid. I gave it 4 stars because the writing was good. The story was good. But for me, it had some scenes in there that were not pleasant. But there were some scenes in here that were quite difficult to read. Especially there are some shark deaths that are quite unpleasant. And there's also a recount of when he killed a fish that was with a partner, and the male fish, after they killed the female, was sort of jumping up to see where the female had gone. And it was, yeah, that upsets me. That upsets me a lot. But the writing was solid, and I would definitely read more Hemingway. Then, finally, that was my TBR pile done, so I finished off with a graphic novel. This is The Fade Out by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. This was one for me in a giveaway on Victoria at the Hermes Progress channel. I will link her down below. She's fantastic. Thank you very much, Victoria. I was really in the mood for a graphic novel, so this was perfect. This is basically like a film noir kind of graphic novel. The only thing I would say, I was enjoying this, and then it ends very abruptly and nothing's wrapped up, because obviously there's going to be more of them. But that irritated me slightly because I've never read a graphic novel series before, so I wasn't expecting it to come to that abrupt end. I don't know if I'll pick up another one of these. I enjoyed it for what it was, but as I say, it's not something that I would go crazy to pick up again. I liked the style though. I liked the noir-esque effect in a graphic novel because I've never read a graphic novel like that before, and it very much captured the sort of feeling of the time. And yeah, that was everything I read in the 24-hour readathon. Please let me know how you did if you took part. Link your videos down below and I will check out your progress. And yeah, can't wait for another one. Bye!